Well, welcome everyone. So we are discussing, this is our second and final discussion of Scoundrels, Russian Scoundrels. And I'm just astonished that there were twice as many readers of these absolutely obscure novels that I dragged you kicking and screaming to read than The Three Musketeers. I really thought The Three Musketeers will be so popular, but people, I think, just assume that The Three Musketeers is for kids. And it just has that reputation. It's a movie that you watch when you are six and then you forget all about it and you never have to deal with it again. But it's such a sophisticated novel. I'm loving every second teaching it. And it's funny, like I go back and forth teaching Russian literature and French literature. And French literature for me is so much more fun because it's like it's not my job. I don't have to teach French literature as a part of my academic curriculum. So I just have so much fun doing it. With Russian literature, I feel like I have to give you so much. I have to give you my soul. I have to explain to you why this is so very, very important. And in the case of Fathers and Sons, it is so very, very important because with Fathers and Sons, that is the foundation of all of Dostoevsky. So since we made a commitment to, some of you actually read Brothers Karamazov with me, which is amazing. But we're not just doing Brothers Karamazov, we are doing the Great Five plus a smattering of all the other Dostoevsky novels. And so in order to, and all this is so that we can appreciate Brothers Karamazov even more. And so in order to understand all that, we absolutely have to understand Fathers and Sons. And your reaction to Fathers and Sons just made my day, my week, my month, my life. You loved it. You had such a hard time warming up to this character. And you were probably questioning, why is Anna so bonkers about Bazara? Like Anna, we love Anna. Anna has been with us. Anna is our friend. Anna, we know Anna. What's wrong with Anna? Is Anna okay? Because she's just so committed to this character who seems to be so hard to love. And so abrasive and so chip on my shoulder and I don't care. And I'm dragging the whole world down with me because I have a chip on my shoulder. But do you see how brilliant this novel is? And it cost Turgenev his entire literary reputation to write it. It's unthinkable that a novel this great can destroy a writer, and it destroyed him. And that's why I recommended reading the Europeans, which I've not read before. So all of these extra readings that we are engaging in, it's also new to me. I love Orlando Fige's Natasha's Dance. I use it as a textbook in my classes, in my Intro to Russian Culture, precisely because Orlando Figes is so conversational. He does not force information on you. He gives you so much information, but he leads you through it in such a discursive way that we trust him. And so I love his Natasha's Dance, and the Europeans is a revelation. There's a hand here. Jen. Do you have a question? Sorry, you are on mute. Hello?
No, I don't have a question. Did I accidentally push that?
Okay, wonderful. Well, good to know. So yes, Orlando Figes gives us this incredible overview of the entirety of the 19th century. So after you dip into his book, The Europeans, you will not have any questions about the 19th century. Like he exhausts, there's not a single 19th century question that you will ever need to have answered. I mean, the scope of his research is absurd. It is just incredible. He knows how much money everyone has gotten for every single publication, who published where, how the publications were transported through Europe, where the chronological order of all of the translations. Just, it's an entire world of this explosive European cosmopolitan culture that was wiped out by World War I, never to be resurrected again, because the world was divided into East and West after that, and we're still dealing with the consequences of it. It's quite absurd to be in Europe right now Europe is grumpy. I mean, Europe, I've never seen anything like this. And, I am a 19th century European, right? I'm like East and West and Turgenev comes to France because he can't live in Russia because of fathers and sons. Dumas goes to live in St. Petersburg because he can't live in France because he detests Napoleon III as much as Victor Hugo detested Napoleon III. So I am that European. It was just such a delight to be and I listened to all of these books, so I have no patience for the written word. That's a strange thing to hear from Anna Barker, who has been on this odyssey of books for the past 4 years. But anyway, it's amazing to see how grumpy Europe is right now. I've never experienced anything like this. It is just, if you are hearing on the news that Europe is in an uproar and quite dissatisfied with everything. It is so true. It is so absolutely true. But also Europe's cafe culture is going strong, stronger than ever. So it's just this incredible combination of political discontent and aesthetic joy that is just so superbly European. So Orlando Figes gives us the story of what happens in 1863 when the novel is published. And Turgenev cannot go back to Russia. And he goes back to Russia. He just sort of, goes back for a little while, goes hunting, goes to visit his friends, comes back to Pauline. Of course, Pauline at this point cannot go back to Paris because her husband is, and I always hate, like you probably noticed, I stay away from the word Republican because I can't say that word in today's very charged political context. But that is the correct way to describe supporters of the Republic in the 19th century. And I always have to preface that by saying that Pauline Viardot's husband, Louis Viardot, was a Republican. He detested Napoleon III and his authoritarian ways. So 19th century Republican was a liberal. And so it's very, very hard to explain in the context of today US political culture. And so these two lovely human beings, Turgenev cannot live in Russia because he published a novel that destroyed his literary career, but which is just the best novel imaginable. And Pauline Viardot cannot live in France because Louis Viardot supports the Republic in France, and he detests Napoleon III and his usurpations. So what is the perfect place for these two to live? Baden-Baden in today's Germany. And it's just such a short drive from the French border. And that's where all of Europe's aristocracy gathered for the summer. It was the spa for the summer. And I did not get a chance to go to Villa Viardot because I was there in the middle of the night. And it's just so amusing that that photograph, I had to see the statue of Turgenev in Baden-Baden. I got into town, like it was 10 p.m., it was raining. My whole month has been just like driving with windshield wipers going through the rain looking for historical sites. And it's quite amusing. But I finally took the picture, and all of a sudden I heard voices, and I thought, who could be out and about in the dark in the park? And I heard a child's voice calling another child whose name is Denise, and he said something in Russian. And I just thought it was so amusing that I have at 10 p.m. in Baden-Baden in the rain, and the only people who would be walking through this park with Turgenev statue would be Russians with children. It's one of those things, So it made me think, like, we are Europeans. I'm just like this trilingual Russian, Hungarian, English speaker who has to see the statue of Turgenev in Baden-Baden at 10 p.m. while the only people who would be walking in the dark in the rain would be people with children who are wiggly and need to get a little bit of running around done before bedtime, and they just happen to be Russian, and all this happens in Baden-Baden. It's just amazing to what extent Turgenev's Europeanness is so crucial to who he was. He spoke every language. He was translated in every language. He could supervise his translations into every language because he spoke every language. And then, of course, he was, some people can't hear. Can everybody hear? Okay. Yeah, so he could supervise the translation of Pushkin and Gogol and Lermontov, and later on Tolstoy and Turgenev into European languages. So he became the conduit of European culture in the West. And I don't know if you know, but one of his best friends was Prosper Mérimée, who actually he became the founder of the antiquities database for France. So the Mérimée database is the database of all French antiquities. And he was also the person who was so enamored of the French Middle Ages, the same way as Victor Hugo. Of course, his novel Notre Dame de Paris, which was published in 1831, is responsible for the reconstruction of the Notre Dame Cathedral, because the French all of a sudden realized, oh, we have this medieval background, medieval history in our own city, and it's crumbling. So this resurrection of medievalism in France was hugely connected to both Victor Hugo and Prosper Mérimée. Well, Prosper Mérimée learned Russian because of Turgenev. And this is the man whose name is given to the French Antiquities database. And he learned Russian so that he can read Pushkin in Russian, because Turgenev was so exquisitely in love with Pushkin's works that, and they're untranslatable. The fact that we read a translation that was actually workable and enjoyable was a miracle. And so Prosper Mérimée learns Russian, reads Pushkin in Russian, and then he's a fabulous writer. He writes mostly short fiction, and one of his collections was this book that he said, well, they're just translations. You see, he created original work that he called a translation. So all of this, like, European 19th century is so exciting. And one of those works is called Carmen, and so, which was inspired by Pushkin's poem, which he wrote when he traveled through what was then called Bessarabia, which is today Moldova and Romania, and it's called the Gypsies. And so Prosper Mérimée, reading Pushkin, was inspired to write a novella about a Spanish gypsy that then inspired a French composer, Bizet, to write the opera. Do you see how exciting the European 19th century is? And all of these people knew each other. They partied together, they drank together. Turgenev was a very heavy drinker towards the end of his life. And then his other best friend was Gustave Flaubert. They were inseparable. They really felt that with them, the 19th century dies, because they were so sophisticated, and they were both craftsmen. You know how with Flaubert, he wrote so very little because he wrote so very slowly. He would write like a sentence for a week because the craft of writing was so important to him. And it was the same with Turgenev. I mean, we saw that these sentences that Turgenev created was superb, even in English translation. And my goodness, did we have a hard time with our Turgenev translations. I've never encountered this much uproar over translations. I would have thought that Turgenev would be easy, but it was Pushkin that was easy. The Pushkin translation was superb. And then was the hero of our time. That was an excellent translation. Was Turgenev. Somebody needs to do a better job, because I was listening to the Russian, and I would be following like 4 translations at one point and saying like, none of this works. None of this is serviceable, because what was it, dead as a dodo, one of you said? Where did that come from? He was just dead. He was a dead man. That's all that the Russian says. But like all of this embellishment and all of these very, very English expressions, it just cluttered the novel so much, where the essence of Turgenev is just this incredibly pristine Russian language. It's just like, it's the Russian language that is the source language, the Russian language of the 19th century. That's Turgenev. And so yes, he could not go back to Russia, because the Russian critics absolutely despised Turgenev for the creation of Bazarov. Because the conservatives were furious. Turgenev was the #1 Russian writer. He was on the editorial board of the Contemporary, Современник, which was the magazine that was started by Pushkin. So this is like the pantheon. He was sitting atop of Mount Olympus. This is the pantheon of Russian literature in the 19th century. And the conservatives, or the traditionalists in Russia, couldn't forgive him the creation of a hero like Bazarov, who was a revolutionary. He was the underminer of the system. He was the one, he was the Samson of the Russian ideological pantheon. He was going to bring it all down with him. And they were shocked that this destructive force, and a force that is attractive. That's the thing about Bazarov. He is an attractive, destructive force. What do you do with characters like that? He is virile. He's thrilling. He's smart. He understands. He's a fighter, and he is. And for that reason, he is attractive to absolutely everyone. I mean, even Pavel probably, like, Pavel respects him. That duel is the best thing ever, because you see that they have this like tongue-in-cheek acceptance of each other. Bazarov respects Pavel because Pavel stands up for his own principles, even though Bazarov says that he doesn't believe in principles. But Bazarov kind of begrudgingly has to admit that, this guy has backbone. He is not like a wavering type. While Bazarov then blames himself for being the wavering type. Do you see how, by comparison with Pavel Kirsanov's unwavering conservatism, which is a liberalism, right? And so it's just, all of these concepts are so hard to fathom because we have two forces here. One is a liberal force, that's Pavel Kirsanov, which is the more conservative force. And then we have the radical force, which is the force of Bazarov, and he's the force of revolution. So radical revolutionary, which is, and also a conservative, like classical conservative liberal, who believes, just freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to express your views. Let's be like Europe. Let's be like England. England is the holy grail for Pavel Kirsanov because they preserve their monarchy and they have a parliamentary system. So for Pavel, England was essential, and thus his attire. He dresses like an Englishman. He is absolutely, his manners are exquisite. His nails are excellent. His whole demeanor is that of the quintessence of Europeanness. And of course, when he goes back to Europe at the end of the novel, some of you asked me one thing, your comments, best comments ever. This was the most overwhelming spring semester for me because I was doing so much more writing, and more about that soon. I'll keep you updated on all of the things. But, I started my column on a thinking cap right around the time when we were doing the Scoundrels. And I realized I'm all of a sudden like spending 6-7 hours a day writing. And it was amazing, but completely overwhelming. I read your comments. I appreciate your comments so much. Best comments ever. They guided my commentary. So reading your comments helped me craft my next comment or my next post, but I simply could not physically respond to all of them. I feel like I need to have like a scribe who will just, so a social media person. I need like a, what are they called? Millennials. Yes, I need a millennial who knows how to do this. I don't even know how to do this. I don't know how to type with my thumbs. I never played a video game in my life, so I completely do not know how to utilize my opposing thumbs. But I need a millennial literally to like follow up with all of the things that I've caused out there online. Your comments were fabulous. And one of the comments was, and it struck me as so good, what about Pavel's resurrection? Like, what do we do with Pavel? And okay, I'll try like not to like weep during my explanation of Pavel, but it's a death. It's a complete, it's the death of Turgenev. It's the death of even someone like Rachmaninoff in the 20th century. It's the fate of a Russian abroad. They check their soul at the gate of Russia, and their soul is lost. I mean, that is the essence of what Turgenev tells us about Pavel. He's dead because his soul is forever in Russia. He cannot move on. I mean, his brother's life, the fact that Nikolai Kirsanov is the person to emulate in the novel. Life happens and he acquiesces to it. He does not fight it. He understands that life is complicated. He's not a fool. He's a very smart, astute man. but he knows that there's only that much fight he can have against life, because then you have no life left. And that's precisely the fate of Pavel. He put all of it into this fight for one great love, and the great love did not materialize. And he was not willing to just say, moving on. He does not have that mechanism with him. Nikolai had the mechanism to say, moving on. He had the great love of his life. I mean, his new estate is called after his first wife, Marina. Her name was Maria. That the description of their first meeting, she was the landlady's daughter. I mean, it's just so perfect. Her skirt brushed against him when they would meet on the stairs. I mean, just the thrill of that makes me want to just melt from excitement. I mean, Turgenev knows how to describe, late teen love so beautiful, and the shyness, and he called her Monsieur because he was just so enamored of this charming young girl who was reading progressive magazines. But as all Russian literary characters who get married and settle into happy country style life, they all abandon their manuscripts. They all abandon their progressive reading, just like Tatiana Larina's mother. So did Kirsanov, Nikolai Kirsanov's wife, Maria. And so did Bazarov's mom. Bazarov's mom seems to be such I mean, she could have lived in Muscovy, old 14th century Muscovy. She would have fitted in just beautiful. It was all of her, like her pantheon of superstitions is so absurd that you can't even fathom. But she also had these progressive views when she was a young lady, and so all of these Russian women all of a sudden get married, just give up on everything, realize that they can like make jam whenever they feel like it, go to the bath whenever they feel like it, which is great. They can appear to dinner in a quilted coat. They don't have to wear a corset. I mean, it's just the benefits of country life. And they sleep 10 hours a day. I mean, a lesson for us all. Lovely life, absolutely lovely life. Nikolai moved on. He had his perfect love. They played duets together. They read Pushkin to each other together. It was a lovely, beautiful life. She died. He had a son that he devoted his life to. Nikolai has no regrets. Nikolai has led a purposeful life where he was not necessarily bending, but he was moving with the times. The first 3 winters, he showed up like a good helicopter parent to visit his son in St. Petersburg. Arkady was there, and he wanted to meet his friends, and he wanted to do what we do when we do to go to parents' weekend and want to have dinner with our kids' friends in college. And it's so incredibly awkward that it works. We must do what we can to appear not to be dinosaurs. And so I still have a kid in college right now. So it's just, I mean, this book, it's like, this book is my life. I read it when I was younger than Arkady the first time, and I've gone through like all of the trials and tribulations of first the children and then the parents. And it's amazing. It works at every stage of your life. But then that's it. He looked into the eyes of a young woman who was lonely. And he was lonely, and one thing led to another, and there's Mita blowing bubbles and feeling very proud of looking very attractive in his little red shirt. I mean, like 6-month-old babies know when they make an appearance. They just know when people like them, and Mita knows when he's liked. And Pavel, when he comes and he sort of lingers, he comes to order stuff from Fenichka, and then he lingers, and it's just because he will never have that. I mean, he's a dead man. He's a dead man the entirety of the novel. And then when he talks to Fenichka and he goes to his room, he lies down on the sofa. He closes the door, lies down on the sofa, closes the curtains. I mean, he's in coffin. He's already in coffin then. What brings him out of this just non-existence is Bazarov. And he's thrilled. He is absolutely thrilled that he has someone to fight with. Life is all about fighting. We hate fighting, and yet if everything in our life would always just work out the way we want to, we would just be so bored. That's not life. That is just, it's too easy. Sometimes easy is good, but easy makes us too content, and contentment is good for a while, but Pavel loves the fact that this young man is here. And when Bazarov comes back after visiting the parents, there's sort of less friction between them. Pavel just sort of, shows up in his elegant English suit, just makes a pronouncement and leaves. What makes him blow up is Fenichka, and Fenichka all of a sudden, after delivering her first baby, she became beautiful. Turgenev says there comes that one summer in a woman's life when she just comes into full bloom, and Fenichka was in that full bloom, and they were all in love with her. I mean, even Arkady, of course, he doesn't want to step on his father's toes, but I mean, she's a suitable age for Arkady. Pavel is madly in love with her. When he is delirious, he actually says to Nikolai, don't you ever think how much she looks like the princess? And Nikolai does not respond, but he just gasps internally. He doesn't want to upset his brother. Because I mean, the man is, delirious after being wounded in a duel at a respectable age of 44. But Nikolai thinks, wow, this is where that comes out. I mean, my goodness. And then sort of that deathbed reconciliation of Pavel interrogates Fenichka and says, Fenichka, I saw you. What was going on in that gazebo? And Fenichka, she's so sweet. She's so innocent. She's such a darling. In Russian, there's a very good word for someone like Fenichka, dushechka. So dusha is soul, and dushechka is like darling little soul. That's what Fenichka is, like darling, sweet little soul. And she says, Pavel Petrovich, how dare you? Let God strike me down where I stand. I've never loved anyone as much as I love Nikolai. And then when she leaves, Pavel is just undone by that. I mean, Fenichka confessing to Pavel with such sincere vehemence that she madly loves his brother is worse for him than catching Bazarov stealing that kiss from Fenichka in the gazebo. And, it flatters Fenichka because she's cute and she's young and she knows how attractive she is. And so Bazarov's flirtations with her are so pleasing to her. Do you see how very, very similar this moment is than in Anna Karenina when Vasenka Vyshlovsky comes and he's constantly talking to pregnant Kitty, who looks very, very cute because she's like a little heavier and a little slower, but she's so cute. And Levin is just, I mean, he's completely losing it. He would have shot Vasenka Vyshlovsky in the forehead. Point blank, if Vasenka Vyshlovsky wouldn't have just acquiesced to leave. But I love the fact that, that Levin puts him on a hay cart, like a peasant cart, with his thick thighs and the ribbons of his Scottish cap flowing. And I love the fact that oh gosh, what is her name? Dolly. She reenacts. I mean, she has her dad's ability to tell a story well. And so she says, oh, well, there I was in my bedroom putting more ribbons in my hair, making myself a little more presentable in this country environment to impress Vasenka Vyshlovsky. And I look out the window and there he is on the peasant cart going bye-bye. So do you see how Tolstoy takes this whole incident with Vasenka Vyshlovsky flirting with Kitty? And where does it come from? Bazarov flirting with Fenichka. So this is the novel that is the foundation. And how many times when we were reading Fathers and Sons, I would say, well, like this goes here in War and Peace. This goes here in Anna Karenina. This goes here in, and then of course in Dostoevsky. It's they had a very strange relationship. I was actually like the first thing that I wanted to see in Baden-Baden at 10 p.m. was the casino, and of course it was pouring. I had a car full of like empty Coke cans and ham sandwich. I can just when I do this like seeing drive by seeing a culture, the car is horrible, and then poor Watson is installed on the front seat, so we're not presentable. We can go into parks, but we cannot go into decent society. And I was there, and it was like the casino that Dostoevsky gambled in. It just blew my mind. And this is the casino that Dostoevsky gambled so much there that Turgenev had to come and bail him out. And then there's a promissory note that Dostoevsky promises to pay Turgenev back. And then the same Dostoevsky just makes merciless fun of Turgenev. I mean, he savages Turgenev in Demons. He creates a character who is this like liberal intellectual writer who wants to suck up to the young radicals. And he just absolutely savages Turgenev. We're going to be howling with laughter, but when we'll be reading, so it'll be fall of, by the time we get to Demons, it'll be fall of 26. You'll have to remember every single word of Fathers and Sons, because that's when that knowledge will come in very handy. So yes, every time we'll be getting into a new Dostoevsky, I will always remind everyone that, you know, you have to like, how long is Fathers and Sons? Like 8-hour audio recording? Something like that. It's not a very long novel. I will actually recommend that everyone should, it's about 160 pages. So everyone will have to read Fathers and Sons before they read especially Demons. Demons is impossible without knowing Fathers and Sons. And let's talk a little bit about my favorite novel, which is The Hero of Our Time. It's amazing. We have readers from Georgia, and every time I mention anything that has to do with the Caucasus, they are so pleased. So a big hello if you are watching, or if you'll be watching later. Actually, the reader from Georgia said that the statue of the Three Musketeers, which I saw in Gascony, it was made by a Georgian sculptor. And she was just so thrilled. And she said, another Georgia connection, even in the Three Musketeers. And I said, yes, because Zurab Tsereteli is a Georgian Russian sculptor. So he was born in the Soviet Union in a Georgian family. It's amazing. His mother is a princess, a Georgian princess, and then he married a Georgian princess. So it's a fascinating country, boundlessly fascinating country. So Zurab Tsereteli is the son of a Georgian princess and the husband of a Georgian princess. I saw his studio in Russia. It's enormous. It's just absolutely like huge in Moscow, and he is a people's artist of Russia, and he was Russian, the director of the president of Russian representation at UNESCO. So a storied, legendary sculptor from Georgia. And so Georgia is a very interesting place for Russian writers, because as I mentioned, Pushkin went there as, you know, this young, hot-blooded, dueling romantic poet, enamored of Byron, and he came back from there deeply introspective. It changed him. And then it's the same with Lermontov. Lermontov actually traveled to Georgia when he was a child, because his life was tragic, absolutely tragic. Mom and dad not getting along, constant arguments, grandmother, one of the wealthiest women in all of Russia. And the mother is, it's maternal grandmother. Parents separating, mother dying, grandmother not ever forgiving the dad having to separate himself from the son suffering, the boy having these constant illnesses. And the grandmother finally thought, well, you know, there's only one cure for this child, and that's the Caucasus. And he was cured. It's just the waters, the mountain air, the sunshine, whatever it was. But he came back, and instead of being a scholar, he wanted to be a soldier. And the grandmother went along with that. Instead of finishing the university in Moscow, he went to St. Petersburg, and he was in the cadet corps, and I mean, crazy stuff happened. I wanted to say another word, but that would be inappropriate. I mean, like barrack culture was the essence of what forged Lermontov's aesthetic sensibilities. It must have been, I mean, Tolstoy went through that too. Tolstoy was absolutely a part of that furnace of human creativity. I mean, but the fighting, the womanizing, the swearing, the drinking, the cards, I mean, it's indescribable. And Lermontov went through all that at like supercharged. He was in that environment in his early 20s, and he died at 26. So but just getting, and it's amazing, like, you know, he's just this drinking, womanizing, gambling young officer in St. Petersburg, attractive, with so much money. I mean, he had his own horses, he had his own servants, he had his own cook. Grandmother was paying for everything. And I love how in the Three Musketeers, they were saying that when you have money, invite all of your friends and feed them. Because then when you don't have money, then you can call on them and ask them to feed you. So it's a lovely way to live. It's you will never go hungry, right? And so it's very much the Lermontov's life, you know, his parties were legendary. And then he writes the poem, The Death of a Poet. Pushkin was shot at a duel, and Lermontov writes this poem, Смерть поэта, The Death of a Poet. And he's accusing the French, the government, the reactionary forces. He's accusing them for murdering the conscience of the nation. And the Tsar was a little upset that his own officer, young officer of his imperial guard, would think so poorly of the Russian government. And he gives him a punishment that was the best thing that could have happened to Lermontov. He sends him to the Caucasus. Lermontov couldn't believe his luck. So most of the incidents that create the core of the hero of our time are from that time when he's in the Caucasus. But of course, he's not a newcomer to the Caucasus. When Pushkin was sent to the Caucasus for writing a few politically charged poems, that was a revelation to him, and it was the novelty of it was just stunning to him. For Lermontov, it was a return to a place where he was happy when he was a child. And then he comes back to St. Petersburg, and he's exiled to the Caucasus again. And he's pretty upset then because he participated in some pretty serious fighting. I mean, just he was a daredevil commander, and his soldiers loved him because he fought wisdom. I mean, they did arm-to-arm combat in the Caucasus, and you know they knew that he's this wealthy kid who is doing crazy stuff, like absolutely crazy stuff. He was reckless, he was fearless, and they were willing to do reckless stuff for him. And when he was presented for an award, then it was withdrawn, and it really destabilized him. He was very, very upset about that, because for him, military life was everything, and just getting the recognition of not just his peers, but his superiors would have meant a lot for an ambitious 26-year-old. So the duel that ended his life was the duel of a very desperate young man. And but he fought duels before. He actually fought not only pistol duels, but he had a sword duel. Was I don't remember how that young man is connected. He was either the son or the nephew of the French ambassador, because he was still accusing the French for killing Pushkin. And so he fought a duel, was this young man, a sword duel, and wounded him. Of course, dueling was not legal. So you're probably saying, Anna, you keep telling us that dueling was not legal, and we read book after book after book where they do nothing but duel. It's amazing how in Fathers and Sons, do you remember the doctor comes and he looks at the wound and it's like, what happened here? But then he's given a bribe and he said, oh, wow, you know, what a strange wound, but never mind. I mean, I see these like once a week. It's just, it's remarkable how just a little bit of money can like hush down the scandal. And of course, everyone knows, but if you are of a certain social status, you can get away with it. And yes, so yes, Hero of Our Time is a novel of such unparalleled genius for the age of the writer, and such incredibly perceptive psychological evaluation of a young man who is smart. In Russian, there's a wonderful word for it, самолюбие. He loves himself. He values himself. He is fully aware of his own merit. He probably knows that nobody will know him as well as he knows himself. He would love to have people know him as much as he knows himself, but people around him are not as perceptive. It's not that they're not smart, they're not as perceptive. And it's terrifying to live in a world where you are more perceptive than everyone else around you. And Lermontov nails it. I mean, he absolutely nails it in this young man. Brilliant, perceptive, courageous, Proud, incredibly proud. And he doesn't gamble, but he's a gambler. He has that gambler spirit. I mean, that whole multi-step process of gaining Bella. And he doesn't just make it happen, but he works within the confines of the laws of the mountains. I mean, he thinks like a Cherkessian. He knows what would make Azamat do this, and he understands what the repercussions would be from Kazbich, and he understands the position of Bella. He calculates all that, and he makes this gamble. So he doesn't gamble with cards or roulette, but he gambles with life, which is quite the next level. That's why when we get to Vulic, the Serbian guy, at the end, he destabilizes Pichorin, because Pichorin finally meets someone who is as much a risk taker as himself. And it touches him, it's like, wow, this guy like shoots into his own temple with a pistol. And he says, I think you're going to die today. Like, what else can you say to a person to destroy that like sublime moment of I own all of you. Like I am so dude that all of you dudes are nothing by comparison with me. And of course he shoots himself in the temple, nothing happens, and then he shoots the next bullet into the wall, and it lodges so deeply that they are stunned. And like, no, he couldn't. I mean, the pettier people, it's like, no, he probably changed, like those he knew, like he somehow calculated the bullet, he did something. But Pichorin is not petty. Pichorin knew that this guy has fire in his belly more so than Pichorin himself, and so Pichorin destabilizes him. And so that kind of cockiness has Vulic just walk down the street, and as luck would have it, the drunk Cossack who attacked the pig attacks Vulic too, and then Pichorin just can't let go. I mean, he cannot be Vulic. Pichorin probably will never put a pistol to his temple. And so he wants to tempt fate. And so he tells the commander, while you're trying to break down the door, I'm going to try to come in through the window. And the bullet, I mean, the drunk Cossack does shoot off his pistol, and the bullet just whizzes past Pichorin's ear, but that's still not enough. It's just not enough. He can never do what Vulic did. And Vulic's death is just, yeah. It's indescribable how good this stuff is. It's you have no idea how many young men I talked to who read The Hero of Our Time, and they said, this guy nails it. I've never read a writer who understood what it means to be 26. Never. And it's terrifying. and they know that it's terrifying. It's like, these guys are so smart, they're so perceptive, they know precisely how they are walking on a razor's edge. And they so appreciate what Lermontov has done, because he has given the portrait of the hero of our time. and young men like that, they are everywhere. They're absolutely everywhere, because I've talked to so many of them, and they just say, thank you, Lermontov. And that's why when Russia had the two Chechen wars in the 1990s, the Russian soldiers who went to fight in that war would have Lermontov's poetry and The Hero of Our Time in their military backpacks, because no one described what it means to be 26 better than Lermontov. Tolstoy did to a certain extent, but by the time he was writing War and Peace, he was 36, 37, 38, 39. There's introspection there. What Lermontov did is he wrote it brilliantly with a tremendous amount of raw genius at the age when it happens. And so that's why he's so appreciated. And then, of course, Tolstoy, he wrote, he was a little bit older. He published The Cossacks, I think, when he was 31 or 32. So once again, there was introspection. there was distancing already. But when the Russians were shelling Grozny, which is the capital of Chechnya, the Chechens evacuated Tolstoy's museum out of Grozny. I mean, that's how much respect the Chechens have for these Russian writers, because they came to the Caucasus and they didn't push Russian imperialist policy in the Caucasus. They brought an open mind and discernment into a world that was alien to them. They came into a world that they were not going to criticize mindlessly. And to this day, these writers are hugely revered in the Caucasus, even though they were the writers from a culture that is constantly at war with the cultures of the Caucasus. The fact that they were so honest in their portrayal of what they saw in the Caucasus, and these are beautiful works of ethnographic research. You know, we finish reading these books and we know what a sakla is and what chihir is and what a kunak is and what a jigit is. We gain a smattering of 10, 15 words, and we understand what they are. We gain an understanding of how things work there. And these writers come to this culture without just saying, well, we are Russian and we're so much better than you. And this is how we do it in Moscow and St. Petersburg and in Tula and Erbil. And because you don't do it this way, you are not as good as we are. No, they come into this world knowing that they are the outsiders. And that's what's so amazing about Pichorin. He wants to not just understand how this culture works, he wants to see if he can function within this culture, and he pulls it off. I mean, when he's leaving Dera at night, and all of this. This is like slapstick humor. You can just see all of those like guys running around the village and screaming Chechens, or Cherkashin, because when he jumps out of Vera's window, he's wearing the outfit. And when Grushnitsky tries to emulate that culture, he overdoes it. Everything looks too new, and everything is too clean, and everything is too expensive. And Victoria knows that your outfit has to be comfortable. Nothing should be like brand new and expensive. The best thing that you should have are weapons, and the weapons have to be just spectacular. And everything else should be like worn out and not so great looking. Guess who emulates that? Steva. Remember when he goes hunting? His outfit is so shabby. Vasinkiewicz comes with like brand new everything, brand new gun, brand new boots, brand new everything. And Steva, he has this like nonchalant devil may care look. He has like a cocky hat that is old, and his outfit is old, and his bullet pouch is old, and like the leather is worn. So you see how that Pichorian attitude towards dandyism, that kind of shabby dandyism, then we encounter one more time in Anna Karenina in the attire in Steva's hunting attire. So yes, Hero of Our Time is. Do I understand that novel completely? I never will. Have I read it many, many times? Countless. Will I reread them many more times in the upcoming few years? Yes, I will. I cannot let go of that novel. It is just so enigmatically brilliant. And the fact that it was written, and Lermontov was 25 when he wrote it, because stunningly, it goes to second edition while he's still alive. And the second edition has his preface to the second edition, and that's the preface that I told you not to read when you are like reading it for the first time. But then I posted his preface to the second edition, and he's just saying, yeah, I'm criticized for this novel. People tell me, is this really what our young people are like? And he said, our reading public is young. They need to be told what to think. We need to explain to them how to feel about the books that they are reading. And what I'm saying to you is like, I'm not going to do that. Our reading public has to grow up, and our reading public will have to just make their own pronouncement. And then when I gave you the afterword for Fathers and Sons, you were blown away. Your commentary was like, this is incredible. Like Turgenev is telling us that he created characters that had a life of their own, and he was just sort of following their development and allowing them to come into their own. It's just like, how is this even possible? Of course, was Dostoevsky, what is so genius about him, he did not know about how any of his characters are going to end up at the end. He just didn't. Sometimes when there was a murder that the novel was based on, and students tell me always like, Anna, I love this Dostoevsky novel. Like, I love all of them, but just the murder in the novel is just so implausible. And like, couldn't he have written a more plausible murder? And like, okay, pause right there, because the only true thing in the entire novel is the murder. He would read about these strange criminal events in the newspapers, and he would like clip out these newspapers and have a folder of all of these clippings from this murder and the investigation and the trial and what the outcome was. And so then he built all of his characters around an actual murder incident that is really, really implausible. Like, people don't walk around murdering people with axes. Like, that's just not done. But for Dostoevsky, the peculiar, the particular, the strange, the singular becomes universal. And that's how his mind works. He brings the universality to the very, very narrow and particular. But then, of course, he dictated all of his novels to his wife. And so what we have of Dostoevsky is the sketches. So the notes that he would take like at 4 a.m. when he would think about what he will enact in front of his wife the next day. And so these sketches, these notes of Dostoevsky, they reveal to him precisely what Turgenev revealed to us, precisely what Turgenev said in his afterword to Fathers and Sons, that he did not know what will happen to his characters. Like, we will get to, I don't know, the beginning of book 6 of Crime and Punishment this fall. Dostoevsky still doesn't know what will happen to his characters. He has no solutions yet. He will be attuned what his characters will be revealing to him of themselves in order to bring the characters to a resolution that is plausible for the character they created. It's incredible. But Turgenev, he shows us the way. He shows us how to do it. And this relationship between these Russian writers and their characters. I mean, Pushkin actually makes a drawing of himself and Onegin. He just says, yeah, Onegin and I were buddies. We would go to parties together. That was fun. And then, we grew apart because he moved to the countryside. He inherited his uncle's estate, and he moved to the countryside, and I had other occupations. Incredible. And then was Lermontov. He just says, Pichurin is a compilation of all of the worst and best features of the young man of our time period. And then, of course, we had to read The Sorrows of Young Werther. It's like, Anna, why did we have to read The Sorrows of Young Werther? Because of how Bazarov dies. Some of you said, Anna, you said that was a passive suicide. Like, that is a very apt way of describing it, and it was. I mean, I always tell my students, so let's say I'm like preparing to take a medical exam, and I've gone to medical school for years, and I am going to be dissecting a decomposing corpse, and I'll make my finger, and I'll be like, nah, I'll find a cauterizing stone like later, later. It doesn't matter what that this will go into my bloodstream. It doesn't really matter. And the student said, well, Anna, what would you do if you did have a cauterizing stone? And just like, I have zero pain tolerance. You have to understand this, but I would light a candle and put my finger on it. I mean, that is one way of cauterizing a wound. And so the fact that Bazarov doesn't do it, and just, when he comes to his bed, it's 4 hours later, it's too late. And he just sort of slips. He checks out. He just completely checks out. He slips into, he stops fighting. And that's what the liberal critics hated about Bazarov. So if the sort of the traditionalist critics hated Turgenev for creating a character who is virile, potent, smart, he's the explosive force of revolution. He's saying, let's just sweep everything off, because whatever comes after us is bound to be better. The nature is not our workshop. Sorry, it's not our sort of inspiration. It's our workshop. Like, everything around us has to have utility. It's the utility of life that we are going to harness to make everyone's life happier. And then as the novel deteriorates and as he realizes that he is susceptible to passions just like all other human beings, and he has to sort of acquiesce to his own humanity, and he doesn't like it because he thought that he was more than human, and it really bothers him that he is human. And that's when he says to Arkady, and I'm so glad that I actually found the Russian painting that has burdocks. I mean, I loved playing with burdocks when I was a child. They are just great for everything. You can make like dolly plates out of them. You can make hats out of them with like, twigs, and just like endless usage of burdocks. And they're so ubiquitous because they are weed. And that's another bad translation where one of the translations said that, by the time this peasant for whose better life I'm fighting, he will have his better life, I will be pushing up burdocks. Well, and one of the translations said, I'll be pushing up daisies. It's like, no, daisies are pretty. Burdocks are a weed. They're always at the roadside. They're really, really dusty. That's the essence of burdocks. And they are like tenacious, they're very like stringy leaves. It's hard to pull them out. They have very deep root. I mean, it's just that they're ungainly, they're hideous looking, they're everywhere, they're weed. And that's why Bazarov hates the fact that he's human, just hates the fact that he's human. And he tried to be so above it all, above art. Yeah. I love he's like nonchalantly talking to Anna Dinso, and he says, oh, and she says, oh, you're looking at that picture, so you're not as averse to art as you pretend to be. Well, I'm looking at it because I'm looking at soil formations. I mean, my God, he's insufferable. But he's just he's just realizing that he's human, and it pains him. And so all of the liberal critics just hated Turgenev for creating the revolutionary potential that he does not allow to form to full self-realization. And so in the Europeans of Orlando 5Gs, we find out that Turgenev is parked in Baden-Baden starting in 1863. He can't go back to Russia because the conservative critics despise the fact that he brought a revolutionary onto the pages of a novel written by Russia's #1 writer. And the liberal critics can't forgive him for not allowing that revolutionary to self-realize. And so, 20 years later, he'll die in the arms of his mistress in Bougival under Paris. And he probably had cancer of the spine at that point. So lots of morphine, and he had every ailment imaginable. He was in bad shape, very, very bad shape by the time he died. He was a young man still by today's standards. It's fascinating that Pauline Viardot lost her husband in 1883. And then a few months later, she literally was with Turgenev. She and her daughter sat by his side through all of his screaming and all of the morphine taking. And I mean, it was just a horrific death. And then she was suicidal afterwards. I mean, her husband died. She lived with these two men basically from her 20s. And then they were both gone. And she was born in 21. So she would have been, in her early 60s. She was suicidal. She jumped out a window. And it was tough. She lost her husband and her lover all the same year. Dreadful, absolutely dreadful. But then she lived to 1910. She lived almost 30 years after her husband and her lover died. She has seen the world that they created, that they loved, fall apart. And Pauline was sort of this link that the 20th century still had to the 19th century, but a beautiful, beautiful long life. Another writer who absolutely adored Turgenev was Henry James. And you see, he wanted to be a European. I mean, he was an American who became a subject of the Queen. And also Charles Dickens was a huge fan. George Eliot was a huge fan. and Turgenev just was hanging out. I mean, like, let's see, Emile Zola and Gustave Flaubert were his drinking buddies. They would get together once a month for a splendid meal that had to have the most like scintillating conversation and get stone drunk. Oh my goodness. Paris of the 19th century, nothing like it, nothing like it. Of course, when I was there, I literally just drove in a downpour to just take a picture of the statue of Alexander Dumas. And there was military police everywhere. It's just, and this was before the election. So France is an interesting place to watch because the election is coming now. The Olympics are supposedly still happening, but I've never seen so much military police on the streets of Paris, and you know, the plexiglass shields, face masks, motorcycle riding policemen, but they would be riding in like groups of 30 or 40. It was incredible. Just stunning to see, and lots of tourists as always. But that is the city where he died. That is the city where he lived. So Napoleon III was arrested on the battlefield. He lost the Franco-Prussian War. Bismarck came to Paris. He came to Versailles. He announced the formation of the German Empire in Versailles. Just end of the world. And that sort of undermined that cosmopolitan culture, because that freedom from nationality that was so quintessential to Europe in the mid-19th century, from the time of the Congress of Vienna of 1815 to the formation of the German Empire in 1870. That is the age of Turgenev. That is the age where all of these Europeans, they spoke every language, they were happy in every culture. Turgenev was probably the writer who traveled more than anyone in the 19th century. He has been everywhere. He has traveled all the time. I mean, he wrote all of these amazing Russian novels abroad. It's stunning. He wrote Fathers and Sons abroad. He wrote Huntsman Sketches, which talks about the life of the Russian serfs in France. And so that's why when another expatriate, Ernest Hemingway, was living in France in the 1920s, guess what was his favorite book? The Huntsman Sketches, because he worshipped Turgenev. He worshipped Turgenev because Turgenev was his kind of writer. The crafting of the sentences, this expert craftsmanship of the language, and this sort of elegant masculinity of both the writer and the prose was very, very appealing to Hemingway. So when he would go to Shakespeare and Company and borrow books, the notes that were taken on all of the books borrowed, they stated that Hemingway borrowed Turgenev's Huntsman Sketches every single year that he lived in Paris in the 1920s. And then, of course, his Nick Adams stories were inspired by Turgenev's Huntsman Sketches, because in Nick Adams stories, this kid who travels to northern Michigan, he still encounters Native Americans who live in northern Michigan. So the honesty and respect with which Turgenev depicted Russian peasants were inspiring Hemingway to write about the native people who were still living in northern Michigan when he was there, when he was a teenager. Because he was born close to where I live. I actually visited Hemingway's house on the day when he was born. And I stood in the bedroom where Hemingway was born on his birthday, Oak Park, Illinois. But the family had vacation home in northern Michigan. And so Nick Adams stories are an homage to Turgenev. One of the titles of one of the Nick Adams stories is Fathers and Sons. So now, in addition to reading the Europeans, and those of you who are reading The Three Musketeers with me, the biography of Thomas Alexander Dumas and the biography of Cardinal Richelieu, now you have to read Ernest Hemingway, who is a magnificent American writer. And he loved Paris as much as Turgenev loved Paris. I mean, now I'm going to give one more book to read. It's Hemingway's A Movable Feast. After the war was over, he came back to the Ritz, and the porter of the Ritz said, Mr. Hemingway, I've been keeping this box that you left here. Do you need it? And Hemingway, to his astonishment, realized that they were his notebooks from the 1920s, and they were just kept through the war. They survived. And so they became the foundation of this book that he wrote that is called A Movable Feast, because he considered Paris to be a movable feast. And Paris is something that will always be with you. And with Turgenev, I mean, Paris was the city where he died. So there you have it. Any questions? Yep. So I teach fathers and sons in all of my classes, everyone. I teach it twice a year. I've been teaching it twice a year for like 20 years. It never gets old. And when I said in my notes that I was sobbing through some of the chapters, I totally was sobbing through some of the chapters. It just touches your soul. It's a very, very deeply, profoundly soulful novel. Hero of our time. I mean, what can I say? I've had students who were getting a university degree after serving in the military. Like I've had students who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan. I had students who were in the Marines. I had students who were in National Guard. And invariably they would say, Anna, I'm taking your class because I wanted to read War and Peace. Because like all these years I've been told that War and Peace is honest about describing what it means to be a young man in your 20s craving war. And I couldn't imagine. I just couldn't imagine that a 19th century Russian aristocrat would describe so precisely what it means to be in your 20s and craving war. And then I would tell them, well, if you like War and Peace, may I recommend The Hero of Our Time? And then they would just like, they would, email me at 3 a.m. and say, I couldn't put it down. I just couldn't put it down. It's like this. This is exactly how we are. He completely nails it. He understands. And the funny thing is, one of the students is in the Caucasus right now. He just literally emailed me 2 days ago, and he said, yada, yada, yada. I'm here reading The Red and the Black in the Caucasus. Of course, I brought a token book with me, The Cossacks of Tolstoy. And then, thank you for everything. And the last line is, and curse you, of course. I mean, it was just such a great email. So, all of these writers, they speak to the 20-something. And I loved how all of you commenting and you were saying things like, yeah, I was like that. Yeah. Like we are criticizing him now and, he's just so awful and he's doing all of this stuff and it's just so completely unacceptable. But when I was in my 20s, I recognized myself. This was me. Well, I teach these young people. I mean, I still live in the world of young people who are forever between like 19 and 22, 23, 24. And when they read these books, they just say like, how is this possible that these Russian guys who wrote in the 19th century, they understand me so well. So there you have it. Irina, I see a hand.
Oh, it was just a perfect to pile onto that. The two most heartbreaking moments for me were in Hero of Our Time when he doesn't come out to see Maxim Maximovich, and that whole interaction just like annihilated me. And then same thing with Bazarov and his mom, and how he treats his parents, and he just leaves, and there's like, he knows he's hurting them, and Pichotin knows he's hurting Maxim Maximovich, but it's like, it's that 20-something.
Yep, they do it. They just completely do it, and they know it. And then the thing is that like they know it, but they have to make it hard for themselves, and they have to make it hard for us. And it's just like I tell people that right now I have 3 kids who are all in their 20s for the next like 9 months. So, and even Watson, who is like 3.5 now, he's in his 20s as well. So I have in dog years. So I completely am living in the world of these people. And they want so much, and it's so hard. and they know that they are capable of these things, but life is just so unkind, and they don't want to compromise, because if they compromise, then yeah, this is just compromising is cowardice. It's like, oh my God, and there'll be the scene in The Idiot where a young lady will ask a young man, "Are you a coward?" And he says, "Well, why would you ask that question?" And she said, "I just want to know, like, are you capable of a great deed?" And he just says, "Well, I'm afraid. But if I'm afraid and I'm not backing down, I'm not a coward." So do you see how Dostoevsky all of a sudden will add just such complexity? Everything that we encountered in Fathers and Sons and in The Hero of Our Time, Dostoevsky will take every single word, every single instance, every single phrase, every single concept, every single feeling, and he will make it so complex. I mean, all of a sudden we'll be seeing in multiplicity of so many colors that we have never even imagined existed. So this was our foundation. We have to like good stonemasons, we had to make the foundation, and the foundation of everything that comes after is Eugene Onegin, Hero of Our Time, and Fathers and Sons. And what you said about Pichorin not coming back to say goodbye to Maxim Maximовich, just infuriating, absolutely infuriating. But also, we know him so well when he wants, like, he fights the duel and he's cold. He's just completely cold. And it's like, oh, well. Do you remember, those of you who read War and Peace with me? There's a character, very young character who dies. And there's an older hussar who wants to be not emotional about it. And he just walks over and says, "Dead, just dead, cold dead." And then we hear this, like, the howling, barking of a dog, and he's like holding onto the fence. And that scene just, destabilizes me. Well, it's that, they don't want to feel, and yet they're human. But with Pichorin, that moment comes when he wants to see Vera so much. I mean, there's only one woman who will always understand him, and she's dying of tuberculosis. He knows that, she was married when they had an affair. Her husband died, but he was not in the Caucasus, and she has no means of surviving. I mean, she has a child. She had to get married because she has no money. And so he comes back to her and she's married again. Well, he takes it a little personally, but she doesn't hold it against him because she knows that he's just not the marrying type. So their relationship is just so debilitatingly complicated. But for those split seconds when they can be together, they're just two human beings who just need each other. And he appreciates that so much. She wants nothing from him. She does not want him to marry her. Like, marry is so hard because there's the expectation that he needs to marry her, and he is not the marrying type. He is just not. And so, but then he needs to see Vera one more time because he's losing the only connection with someone who takes him without any preconditions, and he rides his horse to death, and he's just there, just. I mean, it's the depth and darkness of despair. Like, a human being cannot get any lower than that. And then he just goes home and he sleeps the sleep of Napoleon after Waterloo. I just love that so much. Oh, it just was so perfect. Because like, what are you going to do if you lost the Battle of Waterloo? What are you going to do if you lost the only human being who will ever understand you because your horse died under you, because you rode your favorite horse to death to see the only person that will only understand you? You sleep. And just what else are you going to do? You can blow your brains out, but that's not done. And so you just go to sleep. And that description of Pichorin is just stunning, absolutely stunning. Let me just look. There's like a lot of activity in the chat. My Fathers and Sons. Yes, your favorite was Fathers and Sons, and you didn't expect it. Yeah, did Anna love Bazarov? Why couldn't they? Oh, whoa. Anna is terrified of feeling. Anna is so terrified of feeling. I mean, the description of her father, I wish we would know her father more, because he was the best scoundrel we could ever meet in a novel. he was this financial speculator. I mean, he gambled with money. And so he made a tidy profit. But he was he compromised his family's survival. The mother was a princess, right? That's why she has her mother's sister installed in the house, is sort of like to add an aura of respectability. If you can have an old princess living in your house, you have it made. So nobody pays attention to her. Nobody listens to her. I love how this princess ends up on all the pages of War and Peace, right? Like when Pierre is courting a certain woman in War and Peace, he knows that in this family, like finally somebody tells him what to do. And so he knows that in this family, you have to talk very loudly and politely to the old princess who's living with them. So it's hilarious how often like courtship of young people happens in the presence of an old princess who is installed in the house, because she's deaf, she's blind, and she is a chaperone of sorts for the young lady, so the young people can exchange information sitting next to a deaf, blind, very respectable, completely disregarded ancient princely relative. Anna is terrified because can you imagine what she faced when she was in her teens? She had, Katya was probably 8 or 9 or 10. She could not fathom slipping into the gutter. I mean, they were destitute. She would have gone and, it was the gutter for them, right? So she was lucky. She married someone who was nice to her, who was older and who died 6 years later, leaving her a very, very wealthy widow. She can't compromise that. She can't lose that. She knows what it means to live not just on the edge, but to step on the other side of the edge. I mean, the most brilliant thing she could have done is ask her mother's sister to come and live with them in the provinces. They had no money. They had absolutely no money. Her mother died a long time ago. And so, this princely relative added an aura of respectability for the two girls. And this Odintsov came and married her. She cannot jeopardize that. And she has to say no to feeling in order to not fall overboard, not because she knows, not because she doesn't know what is there, but because she knows what is there. She can't go back there. She just can't go back there. She knows what is there, and she's too cautious, and that's her tragedy. And she marries again, and she marries this man whom she doesn't love, but who could potentially, I mean, she's sort of chasing the man who could potentially do a great deed, right? But her husband is, respectable, probably a politician, was ambitions, who could play a positive role in this world. But she's terrified of the other side, and Bazarov meant the other side for her. All right, maybe one more, and then. Oh, back to the Three Musketeers. Okay, wonderful. So some people already left. Yay. Okay, favorite was Fathers and Sons. Of course, it's amazing. Anna Bazarov. Nothing changed. Yeah, no. The more things change. Yes, don't forget the dangers of going to a ball and dancing. I was so amused because in all of those books, some of you were already like, oh no, they're dancing the mazurka. Nothing good ever comes of dancing the mazurka. It's like reading Anna Karenina conditioned you. And just think, I mean, like, you were already ready for that because of Madame Bovary, because she goes to that ball and, where they break the windows because it was hot. It was just such a wonderful, wonderful scene. But in Madame Bovary, she goes to the ball and she realizes that the life of her dreams is real. And she chases that to her destruction. So yes. Well, Irina, you have your hand again.
Sorry,
You have
if
another
you have time for one quick one, just a kind
Yeah,
of a
absolutely.
comment, and also to something you were saying earlier about, I just thought it was very interesting that we started the talk today with the Europeans and how so much of Russia is European, and yet, like one of the first things that I marked in Hero of Our Time
That was
is
great.
the line is, basically he's saying, it never ceases to surprise me how Russians can totally blend into whatever environment they're in. And then we see this book about a man in the Caucasus living this totally different culture, and obviously very, very different, just very different mentality about everything, how to treat women, how to treat animals, how to treat, etc. So anyway, I just thought it's very, very interesting because as a Russian myself living abroad, but more American than Russian, it is true. We do kind of all blend in wherever we go, whether we like it or not.
But then there's that moment when Pavel Kirsanov goes to the Orthodox Church in Germany. I mean, there's no Germany yet, but he goes, and that look on his face, I mean, he misses it so much. He just misses it so much. It's indescribable. And so Pavel already is dead when he sees Mita. Mita is life. Mita is a 6 months old blowing bubbles. Like, that is life. And Fenichka is life because she's young and giggly and full of just the essence of what moves us forward. And Pavel does not have that, and he'll never have that. But when he stands in that church, that's where a Russian abroad can be completely destabilized if this Russian abroad ends up in an Orthodox church, and it really gets to this Russian. As someone to whom it has happened abroad, it's amazing. It doesn't happen. I mean, it didn't happen to me in churches when I was in Russia. It's like, oh, well, that's a nice service. That's a lot of singing and yay. And I understand absolutely nothing, but 3 cheers. Like, these people really know what they're doing, and good for them, because I have no idea what's going on. That was like my reaction to going to a church service in Russia. Going to a Russian church service abroad, I was undone. And when I was reading that section about what happens to Pavel in an Orthodox church, it just, yes, completely. I just saw the word Onegin flash through. Let's see, somebody said that they loved Onegin too, and then there's this long comment: I really like Eugene Onegin in Fathers and Sons. Hero Time was tough. Yeah, so yes, these are books. I mean, I often hear people say that, thanks for reading these with us, because otherwise I never would have touched these novels. I never would have known about them. I never would have read them. And Eugene Onegin, I really, really strongly recommend that just watch the whole opera. And in order to appreciate the opera, listen to the entire opera. Listen to the entire opera, then maybe listen to some of the arias, separately, so that you would have an appreciation for, you would look forward to when that aria is going to appear in the opera, and then find a good version of the opera that works for you. I really don't like operas that are updated and placed into a setting that is not of the opera. It hardly ever works. So just find a really good version of the opera and then just watch it. Most Russians would know Eugene Onegin through watching the opera. They just feel like, okay, Pushkin is great, but Tchaikovsky gave us the visuals, and because the entire novel is so beautifully represented in the libretto, it's just a joy to experience Eugene Onegin as an opera. And then Werther. Good old Werther. Oh my goodness. Speaking of Europeans, right? I mean, it's just a book that was instantaneously translated into every European language. It made Goethe's fame. He was still finishing Faust, which is such a magnificent metaphysical contemplation on what it means to be human. And he was still known as the author of Werther. I mean, that book gained him the job that he kept for the rest of his life. The Duke of Weimar read Werther, and it's like, wow, this is one crazy young man. I would like to party with him. And so he started sort of like a party companion of Duke of Weimar, and then continued on to be everything, Minister of War, in charge of the Weimar Theater, confidant of the Duke of Weimar's mother. I mean, he stayed there all his life based on this one book that was translated into every language. And how often do we encounter these books where Werther is mentioned? Of course, because I mean, Dumas would have read it too, but it's not mentioned in the Three Musketeers because he's very, very careful to create a historical novel that is very mindful of the history that it depicts, which is the 16th century in France. So, well, I will tell everyone to reread Fathers and Sons before we read Notes from Underground. You're going to despise Notes from Underground. You just be prepared to read a book that you will, I mean, students have, told me for decades now that they've thrown it in the river, they shredded it, they throwed it against the wall, they tossed it in the trash can, they just could not stand that book. Without reading that book, there's no Dostoevsky. And so, because the two characters in that book that evolve into Raskolnikov and Lisa, not Lisa, but Sonia in Crime and Punishment. So mid-August, I will remind everyone to read Fathers and Sons, because Notes from Underground is a response to Fathers and Sons. And then we'll also have to talk about Chernyshevsky and his What's to Be Done, Что делать, which is like a novel that lacks artistic scope. It's an ideological novel. And so Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground is a response to both Turgenev and a response to Chernyshevsky. And Dostoevsky comes into his own with Notes from Underground, and then Crime and Punishment, and boom. And I already have 3 books that you will have to be reading in addition to reading Crime and Punishment. So, and remember, I listen to all of them. So Audible is my best friend in the world. Oh my goodness. I just inhaled so much. I said Audible, and I like lost my ability to speak because I'm so excited about Audible. So thank you so much, everyone. This will be edited and probably placed on our page. I will try to maybe look at your comments at some point this summer, but it was such a joy to read with this group. It was incredible to read. Eugene Onegin in English translation was people who actually were saying that, oh, a week into it, and I'm like thinking in rhyme, and I'm actually writing some rhymes. It was just so adorable. All of a sudden, we were moved by the spirit of Pushkin. So thank you so much, and we'll do 3 Musketeers at the end of the summer, just one, and then we'll probably do 1 or 2, probably 2 or 3 for. 1 for Notes from Underground for sure, because I need to explain it to you. It's like, it's an indescribably, dreadfully incomprehensible little 100-page book, but we have to understand it. So I'll probably do a Notes from Underground, and then we'll do like mid Crime and Punishment and end of Crime and Punishment. So many more Zooms ahead. All right, bye. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye-bye.